Ex-wife learns her billionaire cheated on her during pregnancy, exposes bed photos of him and Mistress. Her world seemed perfect until she discovered the unimaginable. Clarissa Hampton had always prided herself on building an unbreakable marriage with the charismatic millionaire Arthur Hampton. Their lavish home in the suburbs of Los Angeles, their fairy tale love story, and the baby on the way all felt like dreams come to life. Yet behind that polished exterior, a poisonous secret lurked. Late-night texts, hushed calls, and an unexpected photo on a forgotten phone shattered Clarissa's rose-tinted glasses. Fueled by hurt and the ferocity of an expectant mother, she launched a plan to expose Arthur and his mistress for the entire world to see. This is the explosive tale of betrayal, heartbreak, and vengeance, one that would leave no life unscathed. Clarissa Hampton grew up in a modest household in San Diego, California. Her father was a retired firefighter named Samuel Rodriguez, and her mother, Patricia, worked as a school nurse for nearly 3 decades. From an early age, Clarissa had a clear vision of her future. She dreamed of finding a love so intense and pure that nothing could tear it apart. People always said she had a heart of gold, compassionate, gentle, and fiercely loyal to those she cared about. When Clarissa met Arthur Hampton at a charity fundraiser in Newport Beach, she was drawn to him like a moth to flame. He was tall, refined, and every bit as charming as a leading man in a Hollywood film. Arthur's philanthropic efforts that evening demonstrated not just wealth, but also generosity. He funded scholarships for underprivileged students, contributed to local hospitals, and spoke passionately about youth programs. Clarissa believed she had found someone who shared her ideals and thirst for a meaningful life. It only took a few months of courting before Arthur whisked Clarissa away to Paris for a surprise proposal. From that point on, Clarissa was convinced she had found her prince. Little did she know that a fairy tale could quickly turn into a chilling nightmare when shadows of decay. It lurked behind diamond-studded doors. Their wedding was a grand affair that took place at the historic Millennium Biltmore Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. Over 300 guests arrived, dressed to impress society elites, business tycoons, and even the mayor's office sent a representative. Clarissa's extended family, including cousins from Tijuana and distant relatives from Florida, witnessed her walk down the aisle in a custom Vera Wang gown. Arthur's best friend, Thomas Gainsly, heir to the Gainsly family fortune, served as the best man, while Clarissa's college roommate, Naomi Lynn, acted as maid of honor. After the wedding, Clarissa and Arthur settled into a luxurious modern mansion in an exclusive Bel Air neighborhood. Everything about their life seemed like a timeless love story. Exotic vacations, philanthropic events they hosted together, and dinner parties that connected Hollywood A-listers to business magnates. But as time wore on, the glitz of high society seemed to transform Arthur. He became more guarded, his phone never left his side, and he retreated into his study for urgent business calls at suspicious hours. Clarissa shrugged it off at first. After all, running a real estate empire like Hampton Holdings demanded ceaseless work. She convinced herself that success came with sacrifice, never suspecting the danger lurking beneath her husband's polished exterior. By the time Clarissa discovered she was pregnant, Arthur had already begun to show signs of distance. He was sometimes gone for days on sudden business trips, usually with minimal explanation. It began with frequent overnight stays at his downtown penthouse, an inheritance from his late uncle, Martin Hampton. When Clarissa questioned him, Arthur responded with benign stories of unexpected meetings with foreign investors, tangled government paperwork, or critical site inspections across various real estate developments in the country. Nonetheless, her pregnancy seemed to momentarily bring them closer. Arthur happily painted the soon-to-be nursery, meticulously selecting the best Italian furniture and the safest baby gear. They shopped at high-end boutiques for adorable designer baby clothes, from Burberry onesies to Gucci baby shoes. In these moments, Clarissa felt her hopes soar again. Perhaps her worries were unwarranted. Perhaps Arthur was simply juggling fatherhood preparation with his demanding corporate responsibilities. Still, a nagging voice deep inside her refused to quiet down. When Arthur spent more time texting late at night or rushing to pick up secretive calls, Clarissa's chest tightened in anticipation of heartbreak, yet she could not bring herself to consider the obvious, that Arthur might be betraying her. She told herself that pregnancy hormones had made her overly suspicious. If only she had trusted her instincts. Clarissa's first real moment of alarm came during a routine prenatal checkup at UCLA Medical Center. She was waiting alone in a crowded waiting area because Arthur had sent a hurried message that he was stuck in a critical meeting. Usually, he'd do everything in his power to attend these appointments. He loved hearing the baby's heartbeat through the ultrasound. But this time, he was a no-show. She tried to call him several times, only to be greeted by voicemail. On her way back to her car, a random acquaintance, Charlotte Porter, a longtime family friend, mentioned seeing Arthur at the Redwood Lounge the night before. He had been accompanied by an elegant brunette who didn't look like Clarissa. Charlotte's tone was hushed and uncomfortable, as if she regretted bringing it up. Clarissa tried to brush off the comment, but her heart pounded with dread. When Clarissa confronted Arthur about it later that night, he calmly explained that he had gone out to meet a business associate from London who was in town for a single evening. The woman was the associate's sister. Clarissa felt foolish for suspecting him. She forced a smile, gave him a kiss, and desperately wanted to believe him until the uneasy suspicion returned in her dreams that very night. Tension grew, creeping into every corner of their marriage. Clarissa struggled with fatigue and morning sickness, while Arthur seemed increasingly on edge. Conversations became terse and perfunctory. Arthur snapped at the slightest question about his schedule, insisting he was under immense pressure, closing deals for an upcoming Hampton Holdings expansion in Texas. Desperate for stability, Clarissa decided to confide in her old friend Harriet Stone, who had once worked as an assistant at Gainsley Pharmaceuticals. Harriet's knack for reading people had proven invaluable to Clarissa when they first moved among Los Angeles' social elite. Over a brunch of avocado toast at the famed Café Gratitude, Harriet listened calmly as Clarissa poured out her worries, Arthur's absences, strange phone calls, and that unsettling comment from Charlotte. Harriet encouraged her to keep an eye out for anything else that might be amiss. She reminded Clarissa that emotional well-being was paramount, especially during pregnancy. They parted ways, and Clarissa vowed to trust but verify. It was a quiet promise she made to herself, hoping she would never uncover the devastating truth lurking just beyond her fragile happiness. Arthur's business empire was booming. His father, Clarence Hampton, had laid the foundation of Hampton Holdings decades ago, focusing on luxury real estate developments across California and Nevada. Arthur's innovations modernized the company, expanding into digital real estate marketplaces and forging deals in lucrative foreign markets. Industry magazines named him one to watch, Business Maverick of the Year, and even Forbes included him on their 30 under 30 list before he turned 30. While Clarissa had always admired Arthur's ambition, she began to question how much it cost them. He was rarely home for dinner, missing important milestones like Clarissa's second trimester ultrasound. She tried to mask her heartbreak by delving into nursery preparations, but each missed appointment felt like another little tear in the fabric of their marriage. One late evening, she woke up to an empty bed. At 2 a.m. Arthur was nowhere to be found. Pacing anxiously, she finally heard the garage door open an hour later. Arthur returned home disheveled, his shirt collar slightly askew, and an awkward stammer in his explanations. Clarissa watched him warily, the seed of doubt now blossoming into silent conviction. Something was terribly wrong, and she needed proof. Determined to safeguard her child's future and her own peace of mind, Clarissa decided to collect factual evidence before confronting Arthur head-on. She started by noting unusual credit card charges that popped up in their monthly statements. A few suspicious expenses at upscale hotels in Beverly Hills, the purchase of a costly diamond necklace from Cartier that she never received, and lunches at exclusive restaurants she had never visited. One night, Clarissa waited until Arthur had fallen asleep, then carefully scrolled through his phone while it lay charging on his nightstand. With trembling fingers, she searched for any sign of a covert life. Her heart pounded with each passing second. Most of his messages seemed business-related, but a particular thread, labeled SP, stood out. She opened it and froze. The conversation was short but intimately coded. Details of secret rendezvous, mentions of miss you, and even a cryptic reference to a shared hotel suite. Clarissa's world tilted. Who was SP? Friend, colleague, or something else? In that moment she nearly confronted Arthur. Instead, she forced her panic down, snuck out of the room, and began a slow, controlled spiral of heartbreak. She would find out everything one step at a time. As Clarissa dug deeper, the pieces of a dark puzzle started to fit. An expense report for a weekend trip labeled Business Meeting San Francisco matched the same time frame where Harriet Stone had casually mentioned seeing Arthur's Instagram story from a rooftop bar in Santa Monica. A private investigator, recommended by Harriet, was her next step. Clarissa recognized the risk. Hiring a pie without just cause could damage her relationship beyond repair if she were wrong. But her gut insisted she was not wrong. She met with a discreet investigator named William Barnett, who specialized in high-net-worth individuals. They convened at a quiet cafe near Griffith Park, far from Arthur's usual haunts. With her heart hammering, Clarissa handed William the suspicious credit card statements, hotel receipts, and the phone screenshots of the SP text thread. She pleaded for absolute confidentiality, anxious that Arthur's connections could easily make William vanish if he discovered Clarissa's plan. William accepted the case, explaining he had handled dozens of similar scenarios. Clarissa forced a half-smile, grappling with the stark reality that her beloved husband might be living a life of secrets and that she was so desperate for truth. She was paying a stranger to uncover the extent of his betrayal. With William Barnett on the case, Clarissa felt a mixture of dread and hope. She busied herself with prenatal yoga sessions and lunches with supportive friends. She even spent time volunteering at the local children's shelter, hoping acts of kindness might give her a semblance of control in a world unraveling. Each day brought her closer to motherhood, but also closer to the day the truth would come crashing down. Meanwhile, Arthur grew more distant. His phone was perpetually on silent, face down on the table. He spent weekends sequestered in his home office, claiming to be analyzing business proposals. Yet Clarissa rarely saw or heard him working with his usual intensity. She noticed the subtle hints, the faint smell of unfamiliar perfume on his suits, or the extra time he took to groom himself before leaving for last-minute dinners with foreign investors. During a particularly lonely evening, Clarissa paced the grand foyer, gazing at framed photos of their wedding day. She felt as though she were staring at strangers. The laughter in Arthur's eyes seemed so genuine back then. Was it all a facade? Tears stung her eyes, but she swallowed them. She needed clarity more than sentiment. And the truth was coming, whether she was ready for it or not. The call from William Barnett arrived precisely 2 weeks after their first meeting. Clarissa answered with trembling hands, heart pounding so loudly she thought the entire house could hear. William's tone was professional, yet somber. He asked to meet in person. The details were too sensitive to discuss over the phone. They arranged to meet at a small park in Pasadena, an area Arthur never frequented. Clarissa parked a few blocks away, discreetly checking her surroundings to ensure she hadn't been followed. She found William seated on a bench near a secluded pond. He wore a nondescript jacket and sunglasses, leaning forward as though burdened by the weight of his findings. When Clarissa settled beside him, he slid a manila folder onto her lap. "Everything is in there," he said quietly. Her eyes flickered from his face to the folder. William spoke softly. "I'm sorry, this is never easy." Clarissa opened it to find photograph after photograph of Arthur, not alone, but with a stunning brunette who matched the description Charlotte had given. Each shot seemed to slice Clarissa's heart in two: clandestine dinners, passionate kisses, and a final, devastating series of bed photos taken inside a penthouse suite at the Four Seasons in Beverly Hills. Clarissa felt nausea well up in her stomach as she flipped through the photographs. In some, Arthur's face beamed with an unmistakable intimacy, the same warmth he once reserved only for her. Her vision blurred with tears. She took a moment to compose herself, pressing a hand against her belly as if to shield her unborn child from the pain swirling around her. William gently explained the details he had discovered. The woman's name was Simone Parker, SP. She was a former model turned luxury real estate agent, known to frequent high-profile parties. She and Arthur had apparently been seen numerous times in Beverly Hills lounges, intimate dinners in Santa Monica, and weekend getaways disguised as business conferences. Though Clarissa had expected the evidence to be conclusive, seeing it physically documented was a shock. This was real. Her husband was cheating on her, and all while she carried his child. The reverberations of that betrayal cut deeper than any heartbreak she had ever imagined. William offered a sympathetic look. "I'll gather more information if you need it," he said, gently placing a comforting hand on Clarissa's shoulder. But Clarissa could barely speak. Her world had caved in at her feet. Clarissa drove home in a daze, the photographs and William's notes tucked safely in the passenger seat. Her mind whirled with disbelief, anger, and sorrow. She recalled all the times Arthur had scolded her for being paranoid, all the guilt she had shouldered for suspecting him when he was merely working late. Every lie played in her head like a broken record. She had prayed she would be wrong, that maybe her instincts were clouded by hormones and stress. But the truth was undeniable now. Arthur's betrayal was woven into tangible images, so cruelly vivid that Clarissa couldn't unsee them. She pulled into their driveway, a home that once symbolized unity and success, and sat there for several minutes. Tears streamed down her face. She tried to gather her wits, mindful of the baby inside her. Emotional turmoil could harm her unborn child, she reminded herself. Slowly, Clarissa wiped her cheeks, breathed deeply, and resolved to face the days ahead with as much poise as she could muster. Heartbreak or not, she had to plan her next move. She refused to let Arthur's treachery define her child's future or rob her of self-respect. The tears dried, replaced by a glimmer of steel in her gaze. Over the next few days, Clarissa struggled to maintain a facade of normalcy around Arthur. She cooked dinner as usual, attended prenatal appointments alone, and pretended to be blissfully unaware of his secret life. Beneath the surface, however, her mind was methodically piecing together her plan. Surprisingly, Arthur also seemed to sense something amiss. His once cavalier attitude around the house shifted into a defensive vigilance. He changed his phone password, traveled with more security detail, and did not leave any bank statements lying around. It was as if he knew the walls were closing, and perhaps Simone had warned him of being followed. Clarissa turned to Harriet Stone for counsel. Over a quiet lunch, they pored over the photographic evidence. Harriet tried to disguise her shock, but her trembling hand gave her away. "You can't let him walk all over you," Harriet said, eyes fierce. Clarissa nodded, tears stinging. Betrayal had transformed her heartbreak into a determined fury. Her unborn child's life would not begin in the middle of a deceitful marriage. And she sure as hell was not going to be the pitiful wife left in the shadows. Clarissa remembered how many times Arthur boasted about loyalty and truth in business. "Transparency is a cornerstone of success," he would say at corporate events. The hypocrisy struck Clarissa now like a slap to the face. She considered her options. Confront him privately? Threaten to leave? Demand he end the affair? None of these scenarios felt satisfying. The images of Arthur and Simone entwined in bed haunted her day and night. Her friend Harriet, more outraged than ever, suggested a public expose, some form of grand reveal that would expose Arthur's double life to everyone. At first, Clarissa resisted. She didn't want to hurt innocent people like Arthur's employees or turn her personal tragedy into a spectacle. But the more she mulled it over, the more she realized that Arthur's entire empire thrived on his public reputation as a devoted husband and upright businessman. If Clarissa was going to deliver a message, it had to be loud and impossible to ignore. She steeled herself for the repercussions, reminding herself that she was not just fighting for her dignity, but for her child's future. If Arthur had no qualms about tearing their family apart, why should she protect his pristine image? Clarissa decided to be strategic. She knew that Arthur was gearing up for a major event, the Hampton Holdings annual gala, an opulent affair designed to showcase the company's philanthropic achievements, unveil new developments, and dazzle potential investors. It was also a star-studded highlight of the Los Angeles social calendar, with celebrities, politicians, and media figures in attendance. Arthur had been prepping for weeks, finalizing a speech about family values in modern business. The irony burned Clarissa, but it also presented her with a golden opportunity. She enlisted Harriet's help in digitizing the incriminating photos. She was no tech expert, but Harriet arranged a secure, anonymous web link to a curated slideshow titled "Arthur Hampton, The Truth Behind the Facade." Clarissa's hands shook as she typed in the final touches on her laptop. This was it, the nuclear option that could destroy Arthur's precious reputation in a single night. Fear mingled with resolve. She felt a pang of guilt, but the agony of betrayal overshadowed any lingering loyalty. With the countdown set, Clarissa closed her laptop and stared out her window, bracing for the storm she was about to unleash. The night of the gala arrived. The venue was the grand ballroom of the newly opened Hampton Towers, a glittering skyscraper that soared above the Los Angeles skyline. Clarissa dressed in a sleek black gown that emphasized her baby bump, though she wore it like armor. She arrived separately from Arthur, claiming she had a final prenatal checkup. In reality, she needed time to ensure Harriet coordinated everything behind the scenes. Photographers snapped away as Arthur appeared on the red carpet, looking every inch the dashing mogul. He scanned the crowd, eyes narrowing when he spotted Clarissa, but quickly pasted on a public smile. Clarissa forced herself to play the role of the gracious wife, greeting guests politely. Her heart hammered. Tucked in her clutch was a small remote control that would trigger the slideshow on the enormous LED screens set up for a surprise presentation after Arthur's keynote speech. The event commenced with cocktails and a dinner. Politicians lauded Arthur's philanthropic contributions. Socialites gushed over the architectural brilliance of Hampton Towers. Clarissa quietly steeled herself. This was not just about revenge, it was about revealing the truth and liberating herself from a marriage built on deceit. Arthur took the stage with confidence, addressing the crowd of hundreds. He spoke of legacy, honor, and the power of unity in family-run businesses. Cameras flashed. Investors nodded, enthralled, Clarissa watched from her seat, each praise and accolade twisting her gut with bitter irony. The hush that fell over the crowd when Arthur paused for applause was her cue. Harriet, hidden near the control booth, discreetly signaled Clarissa. Clarissa's trembling fingers gripped the remote control in her clutch. She stood, slowly, and pressed the button. The overhead lights dimmed. Arthur looked momentarily puzzled, then gestured to the AV technicians to bring up the surprise presentation, clearly expecting a triumphant montage of Hampton Holdings' successes. Instead, the massive screens flickered to life with the first photo, Arthur and Simone at a candlelit dinner in Beverly Hills, gazing into each other's eyes. The audience gasped. Arthur stood frozen. Before he could react, the slideshow progressed, dozens of images, capturing Arthur's betrayal in glaring detail, culminating in the damning bed photos of him and Simone entwined in a hotel suite. Pandemonium erupted. The crowd gasped and whispered. Flashes from cameras went off like machine gun fire. Within seconds, every phone in the ballroom was recording or snapping pictures of the projector screens. Reporters scrambled to confirm the identity of the woman. Sponsors exchanged horrified glances, uncertain whether to stay or flee. Arthur frantically gestured at the AV booth, barking orders. His face contorted in fury and panic. Security personnel rushed forward, fumbling with wires, but Harriet had locked the system, so the slideshow ran in a continuous loop. A thunderous hush fell when the final image froze on the screen. Arthur in bed, half naked, kissing Simone's bare shoulder. Clarissa felt a strange numbness, like she was an observer rather than a participant. Then Arthur, nearly toppling the podium, spotted Clarissa standing at the edge of the stage. The raw betrayal in his eyes was tinged with desperation. He lunged toward her, but she took 2 steps back, her heart pounding. She clutched her belly protectively, unwavering in her gaze. This was the moment of reckoning, and though her tears threatened to spill, her resolve did not waver. Media outlets exploded with headlines the very next morning. Arthur Hampton exposed. Millionaire mogul's gala affair scandal. Paparazzi surrounded the gates of the Hampton mansion, snapping pictures of any movement. Inside, Clarissa woke up after a restless night to find her social media flooded with messages, some sympathetic, some judgmental. Arthur had not come home after the gala. Clarissa had gone to bed alone, her mind replaying the chaos. Now, stirring in the quiet morning light, she wondered how quickly her life had changed from a dream marriage to a public spectacle. She sipped herbal tea on the back patio, pressing a hand to her abdomen. The baby kicked, as if to remind her of the innocence still growing within. Her phone buzzed incessantly with calls from unknown numbers. She recognized reporters' hungry attempts to land an exclusive scoop. She ignored them all, turning instead to Harriet's supportive messages. The wave had been unleashed, and there was no turning back. Soon Clarissa would have to face Arthur, and she wasn't sure what to expect: rage, desperation, or maybe pleas for forgiveness. Yet in the hush of the morning, she felt a glimmer of peace. She had reclaimed her truth, no matter how painful. Arthur finally appeared late that afternoon, letting himself into the house with his key. Clarissa stood in the living room, arms crossed, waiting. He looked disheveled, eyes ringed with red and hair unkempt, so different from the polished man she once knew. For a long moment, neither spoke. "What have you done?" he asked, his voice shaking with a blend of shock and indignation. Clarissa held her ground. "I showed the world what you truly are," she said quietly, "and let's not pretend you don't deserve this." Arthur's face twisted with anger. He launched into a tirade how he had investors pulling out, board members questioning his leadership, and a PR nightmare on his hands. He accused Clarissa of destroying his life's work. She felt her anger flare. "You destroyed this marriage, Arthur," she retorted. "I just refused to stay silent." They both stood there, a battlefield of unspoken words. Outside, the paparazzi cameras clicked in the distance. Inside, A marriage lay in ruins. Arthur demanded that Clarissa issue a public retraction, claiming the photos were doctored. "You think people haven't manipulated images before to ruin reputations?" he insisted, pacing the living room. "Just say Harriet or your so-called pie faked them. We can salvage this." Clarissa almost laughed at the absurdity. She leveled a steady gaze at him, tears threatening to breach, but never quite falling. "No, I won't lie for you," she said, voice quivering with disgust. "And those photos aren't fake." Arthur's pent-up fury exploded. He hurled a glass across the room, shattering it against the wall. For a moment, Clarissa's fear spiked. She took a step back, one hand bracing her belly protectively. Arthur flinched at the sight of her maternal posture, as if realizing he stood on dangerous ground. A heavy silence loomed. Then Arthur softened his tone, almost pleading, "Think of our child, Clarissa. We can fix this. I'll end it with Simone." But Clarissa had seen enough. She shook her head, voice steady. "I've already thought about our child, Arthur. That's why I can't let you lie or manipulate me anymore." Clarissa fled to the sanctuary of her bedroom after that heated exchange. She locked the door, refusing to let Arthur follow. Sinking onto the bed, she clutched a pillow to her chest, trying to quell the panic rising inside her. The weight of what she had done, exposing him so publicly, pressed on her. But each time doubt crept in, she recalled the bed photos of Arthur and Simone. The betrayal felt too vast to forgive. She needed to act quickly to secure her future. Although she had a prenuptial agreement with Arthur, it primarily concerned the distribution of assets. It did not account for public scandals, nor did it guarantee child support or custody arrangements. The thought of dragging this into a legal battle made her stomach twist. Suddenly her phone rang. It was Harriet. Sensing her turmoil, Harriet recommended Clarissa consult a top divorce attorney named Rachel Steinberg, whose specialty was representing high-profile spouses. Clarissa inhaled sharply, registering the finality of that suggestion, divorce. The word reverberated in her mind. While not unexpected, the official step felt immense and irreversible. Could she truly walk away from the man she once adored? Then again, did she have any other choice? The following morning, Clarissa met with Rachel Steinberg at her discreet Beverly Hills office. The modern glass-walled space gave an air of cold efficiency, perfectly mirroring the serious tone of their meeting. Rachel greeted Clarissa warmly, but her professional focus was evident. After offering Clarissa a seat, she dived straight into the complexities of divorcing a high-profile figure like Arthur. "Your prenuptial agreement does provide for a comfortable settlement, but circumstances have drastically changed," Rachel explained. "Arthur's affair, now public, could shift public sympathy in your favor, impacting negotiations. We can leverage that. However, we must be prepared for counterattacks. High-net-worth divorces often turn vicious." Clarissa's stomach knotted. She confided that her primary concern was ensuring her unborn child's welfare. Rachel reassured her that family courts generally side with the mother, especially if the father's personal conduct raises questions about his suitability. But be ready. Arthur might hire the toughest lawyers. He won't go down without a fight. Stepping out of Rachel's office, Clarissa felt a mixture of relief and dread. The path forward was daunting. Yet, for the first time since uncovering Arthur's affair, she sensed a measure of control. She wasn't helpless. She had a plan. The fallout from the gala still rippled across social media and tabloids. While many sympathized with Clarissa, praising her for standing up against Arthur's deceit, a vocal minority criticized her for airing dirty laundry in such a dramatic fashion. Some called her vindictive, others theorized she was after Arthur's fortune. Clarissa tried to block out the noise, focusing instead on the firm knowledge of her truth. Inside Hampton Holdings, chaos reigned. Several board members resigned in protest or to dodge the negative publicity. Investor confidence plummeted. Arthur scrambled to release damage control statements, claiming misunderstandings and fabricated images, but the photographic evidence was too damning. Meanwhile, Simone Parker had gone underground, no statements, no public appearances. Clarissa stayed in her portion of the mansion, refusing to engage with Arthur's pleas for reconciliation. She busied herself sorting out baby essentials, setting up the nursery, and finalizing legal documents with Rachel Steinberg. Each passing day, her conviction solidified. While it hurt to dissolve her marriage, she couldn't raise her child in a household poisoned by betrayal. Strength, she realized, was not the absence of heartbreak, but the will to move forward despite it. Arthur's sister, Eleanor Hampton, made a surprise visit one afternoon. She was a delicate woman, soft-spoken and rarely seen in the public eye. Clarissa found her standing at the front door, wringing her hands nervously. Despite the awkwardness, Clarissa invited her inside. Eleanor apologized for Arthur's actions, tears glistening. She implored Clarissa to consider the family reputation, reminding her of how the Hamptons had supported Clarissa's charitable initiatives. Clarissa listened patiently, but her patience wore thin when Eleanor tried to position Arthur's affair as a lapse in judgment. A lapse? Do you realize he's been cheating on me for months while I'm pregnant? Clarissa's voice trembled with anger. Eleanor looked away, understanding she had little ground to stand on. Before leaving, Eleanor offered one last plea. Please don't cut yourself off from our family. The baby. It belongs to all of us. Clarissa stood firm, unswayed by guilt. Arthur's actions had severed trust, and the entire Hampton clan would have to accept the consequences. Days later, Clarissa sat in the nursery, stroking her baby bump in a rocking chair. The pastel walls, adorned with cloud decals, contrasted sharply with the turmoil beyond those doors. She thought about the life she had envisioned when she first learned she was pregnant, a supportive husband, a joyous home, a bright future. Now everything was turned on its head. Yet, in the quiet solitude of the nursery, Clarissa felt a renewed sense of purpose. She would pour her energy into giving her child the best life possible. Her dreams did not need to die with Arthur's betrayal. If anything, she felt more determined to stand on her own. Outside, she could hear Arthur on a heated phone call, likely with attorneys, PR strategists, or maybe Simone. Clarissa tuned it out. This was her time, her private sanctuary. She pressed a hand to her belly. The baby kicked gently, as if to say, "I'm here with you." Tears flowed freely now, not out of helplessness, but a mixture of heartbreak and budding hope. Amidst the emotional chaos, Clarissa found an unexpected ally in Thomas Gainsley, Arthur's longtime best friend. Initially, she had thought Thomas would side with Arthur, but he reached out to Clarissa with a gentle text, "I'm sorry. If you need anything, I'm here." Skeptical, she invited him for a conversation over coffee. When they met in a secluded outdoor patio, Thomas expressed genuine sorrow for the betrayal. He confided that he had known Arthur's behavior was slipping. He had seen Simone Parker a few times at business functions and had confronted Arthur privately, warning him not to sabotage his marriage. But Arthur, consumed by temptation and arrogance, dismissed Thomas's concerns. Clarissa listened quietly, her heart heavy. Thomas promised to speak with board members and try to facilitate a fair settlement for her, even though Arthur might resist. Despite her reservations about trusting anyone within Arthur's circle, Thomas appeared sincere. Clarissa thanked him, realizing she needed all the support she could get. After weeks of deadlock, Arthur finally agreed to attend a mediation session, hoping to avoid a prolonged public battle. Clarissa arrived at Rachel Steinberg's office with a clenched jaw and steeled nerves. Arthur showed up late, accompanied by 2 attorneys. His normally confident swagger had dimmed. He looked exhausted, weighed down by the scandal's relentless spotlight. Their respective lawyers attempted to negotiate terms. Clarissa demanded a divorce on grounds of infidelity, full custody of the child with visitation rights for Arthur, and a generous settlement that included financial support. Arthur refused to admit wrongdoing publicly and tried to push for joint custody. Tensions flared as they debated each point, voices raising. Clarissa felt her baby move uneasily, reminding her to stay calm. In the end, the session ended in a stalemate, Arthur unwilling to cede, Clarissa unwilling to compromise her principles. As she gathered her documents to leave, she felt an icy determination. If Arthur wanted a fight, she would endure it. For her child, for her own dignity, there was no turning back. Over the next few weeks, tabloids kept the scandal alive. The press speculated on divorce proceedings, custody battles, and the uncertain future of Hampton Holdings. Simone Parker released a short statement through an attorney claiming she was misled by Arthur, igniting a wave of sympathy for her. Clarissa scoffed when she read the headlines. Certain Simone knew exactly what she was doing. Amid the chaos, Clarissa's pregnancy advanced into its final trimester. She refused to let stress sabotage her health, diligently following her doctor's advice on rest, nutrition, and mindfulness exercises. Supportive messages poured in from old friends, even some celebrities who admired her courage for exposing Arthur. One particularly heartwarming message came from a childhood friend, Jessica Martin of Houston, who had reconnected via social media. Jessica offered emotional support, reminding Clarissa of the resilient girl she once was. Despite the heartbreak, Clarissa felt herself growing stronger. Each day was a testament to her survival and the unwavering love she already felt for her unborn child. She had no illusions that the road ahead would be easy, but she clung to the hope that she and her baby would ultimately flourish, free from deception. As public outrage against Arthur simmered, Clarissa's attorney leveraged the negative publicity in negotiations. If Arthur continued to resist, the scandal would only deepen, tarnishing Hampton Holdings irreparably. The board had threatened to vote him out as CEO if the divorce dragged on in the public sphere. Fearing an irreversible corporate collapse, Arthur begrudgingly resumed mediation. This time, progress was made. After several tense sessions, they reached a preliminary agreement. Clarissa would receive a lump sum payment, monthly child support, and the mansion would be transferred into her name. Arthur would have visitation rights, subject to certain conditions to protect the baby's well-being. Clarissa resisted the temptation to exact more dramatic revenge. She wanted closure, not endless bitterness. When they finally signed off on the terms, Clarissa felt a wave of exhaustion and relief. Arthur's eyes revealed a hint of sadness as he scrawled his signature on the divorce papers. She wondered if, despite everything, he regretted losing her or simply regretted getting caught. The day Clarissa moved Arthur's belongings out of the mansion felt surreal. Trucks arrived and a swarm of movers packed up. Arthur's designer suits, sports memorabilia, and personal items. Standing at the top of the staircase, Clarissa watched each crate go, remembering how she once considered these objects part of a shared future. Arthur wasn't present. He had delegated the task to an assistant. His absence stung, yet it also granted Clarissa space to breathe. The bittersweetness of the moment was overshadowed by her unstoppable need to protect her baby, who would arrive in just a few weeks. In that nearly empty house, Clarissa found a clarity she had never felt before. The illusions of her marriage were gone. She realized that betrayal need not define her. Her heart might be scarred, but it continued to beat, determined to love and nurture the new life forming within her. That thought carried her through the final packing of Arthur's remaining traces from her home. The divorce proceedings concluded swiftly, a testament to how thoroughly Arthur's team wanted to put the scandal behind them. papers were signed, and a judge officially pronounced Clarissa and Arthur no longer married. Clarissa felt a swirling mixture of sorrow and liberation. She had loved Arthur once, deeply. It was difficult to imagine a future without him, yet she would gladly do so for the sake of her peace. The weeks that followed were both exhilarating and nerve-wracking. Clarissa prepared to become a single mother in the public eye. Though the tabloids had moved on to newer scandals, she still caught the occasional mention of the pregnant ex-wife of Arthur Hampton. She tried not to dwell on it, focusing instead on classes about newborn care, finalizing the nursery, and forging new friendships in mommy groups that Harriet recommended. In quiet moments, Clarissa's mind lingered on the question, how had things gone so terribly wrong with Arthur? The memories brought tears, but also profound lessons about trust, self-worth, and resilience. Late one night, Clarissa was jarred awake by a sharp pain. At first, she assumed it was just another round of Braxton Hicks contractions. But this time, the pain intensified, and she felt a steady trickle of fluid. Her water had broken. Heart racing, she called Harriet, who rushed over in minutes. They hurried to UCLA Medical Center under the hush of streetlights. Hours stretched into a blur of labor pains, supportive nurses, and Harriet's reassuring presence at Clarissa's side. Despite the heartbreak swirling in Clarissa's recent past, she tapped into a wellspring of inner strength. Her labor was long and exhausting, but when the final moment arrived and the cries of a newborn filled the room, Clarissa's tears flowed with relief and awe. She held her daughter, a tiny, wrinkled bundle of pure life. The world faded. In that instant, Clarissa felt a sense of hope, realizing that from the ashes of betrayal, something wondrous had taken root. Motherhood transformed Clarissa's world in an instant. She named her daughter Isabella, and the hospital staff couldn't stop cooing over the cherubic infant. Clarissa gazed into Isabella's eyes, marveling at her tiny fingers and downy hair. All the heartbreak, scandal, and legal battles felt insignificant compared to the miracle in her arms. Arthur learned about the birth from Harriet, who sent him a brief text. He arrived at the hospital, standing awkwardly outside Clarissa's room, face drawn with uncertainty. The heartbreak between them loomed large, but the presence of their child forced them into a fragile truce. Clarissa allowed him a brief visit, though she felt tense as he cradled Isabella for the first time. Tears glimmered in Arthur's eyes. For a fleeting second, Clarissa glimpsed the man she once loved, a man capable of tenderness. But the damage was done. Their relationship existed now only as co-parents, tenuously bound by Isabella's future. Over the following months, Clarissa navigated the delicate balance of new motherhood and co-parenting with a man she no longer trusted. Arthur made regular visits to see Isabella, carefully abiding by the visitation schedule. He tried to show paternal devotion, yet Clarissa remained distant. She no longer felt the need to mask her wariness. The illusions had long been shattered. She dove into her philanthropic passions, setting up a small foundation aimed at aiding single mothers who faced similar betrayals. Harriet, ever the loyal friend, helped her network among donors who admired her resilience. Clarissa also reconnected with longtime friend Jessica Martin from Houston, who had once left an abusive relationship. Their shared experiences created a meaningful bond, offering Clarissa both support and perspective. With each passing day, Clarissa found her strength multiplying. The betrayal no longer defined her story. Isabella's presence reminded Clarissa that love could still bloom even after heartbreak scorched the earth. Out in the world, Arthur's empire struggled to regain footing. The scandal had caused rifts in his business alliances, and while he remained wealthy, Hampton Holdings was no longer the shining star it once was. Gossip circulated that Simone Parker attempted to rekindle their affair, but Arthur allegedly brushed her off. Public scrutiny had left deep scars, and perhaps Arthur realized the cost of his choices. One afternoon, Clarissa sat in her sunlit living room, bouncing Isabella gently on her lap. The baby giggled, her eyes alight with innocence. Clarissa admired the stately columns and marble floors of the home that once symbolized marital bliss. Now, it was hers alone, a fortress of sorts, where she was free to carve her own identity. The future stretched before her in uncharted territory. She didn't know what lay ahead, romance, career, or a quiet life of single motherhood. But she did know one thing: the woman she was now was stronger, wiser, and more resolute than ever. Betrayal had forged a new clarity in her, an unbreakable sense of self-worth. On Isabella's first birthday, Clarissa hosted a small celebration in the mansion's backyard. Close friends, including Harriet and Thomas Gainsley, gathered to shower the toddler with gifts and love. Arthur made an appearance, bringing a lavish present, a miniature electric car. Clarissa allowed it, noting that Isabella's eyes lit up at the sight of the bright pink vehicle. The atmosphere was civil, if not amicable. Clarissa and Arthur exchanged polite words, carefully avoiding any mention of the past. Harriet even joked that she should get an award for Best Babysitting Goddess. They all laughed, a testament to how time and distance had somewhat softened the sharpest edges of the scandal. But as the party wound down, Clarissa gazed over the property she had once shared with Arthur. She realized she felt content, no regrets gnawed at her. In fact, she felt a quiet gratitude that fate had revealed Arthur's true nature before she invested more years in a false fairy tale. Now, she had Isabella and a clearer sense of purpose, and that was worth everything. 2 years passed with Clarissa focusing on raising Isabella in a stable, loving environment. The public fascination with Arthur's downfall waned, replaced by fresher celebrity scandals. Clarissa quietly built her philanthropic foundation, assisting women with legal resources, counseling, and financial planning. She also ventured into real estate on a modest scale, leveraging skills she had once learned from Arthur's business circles, but on her own terms this time. Arthur remained in Isabella's life, though Clarissa established firm boundaries. There were occasional arguments about parenting styles or scheduling conflicts, but overall, they maintained a fragile cordiality. Simone Parker vanished from the headlines, rumored to have moved to Europe. Clarissa rarely spared her a thought. Despite the heartbreak etched in Clarissa's past, she thrived. Her life was no longer defined by her ex-husband's wealth or his betrayal. She was her own woman, forging a new chapter for herself and her daughter. And in the quiet moments, she recognized that sometimes the greatest strength emerges from surviving the unimaginable. Late on a summer evening, Clarissa found herself sitting on the veranda, watching a pink sunset over the lush garden. Isabella, now a talkative toddler, slept soundly upstairs. Harriet had just left after a delightful dinner. Clarissa sipped tea, reflecting on the winding road that led her here. She thought back to the day she discovered Arthur's affair, to the horrifying bed photos she had exposed, and to the media frenzy that nearly consumed her. Yet here she was, at peace. She stroked the small gold locket around her neck, an heirloom from her mother, Patricia. Inside was a tiny photo of baby Isabella. Clarissa understood that life's storms were inevitable, but so was resilience. She held the power to chart a new course. Some might label her actions dramatic or vengeful, but ultimately, truth had to come to light, and she had merely refused to keep a suffocating secret. The quiet hush of the night enveloped her, promising that tomorrow was a new dawn. She felt more than ready. 3 years after the night Clarissa had shocked the world with her explosive revelation, she stood on the steps of her mansion, gazing at a moving truck across the street. She was selling the property, a decision fueled by the desire for a fresh start. Isabella clung to her hand, looking curiously at the commotion. Clarissa smiled softly. remembering how once this house had been a symbol of everything she thought she wanted. Now it was a shell of memories both joyous and painful. A prospective buyer approached, an older couple from Seattle who loved the mansion's elegance. Clarissa greeted them warmly, her posture exuding confidence and warmth. As she led them through the spacious halls, she felt no pang of sorrow. Instead, she felt lightness and excitement for new beginnings. Her life had changed irrevocably, yet she stood tall, heart brimming with gratitude for the path that had shaped her into a stronger woman, devoted mother, and fierce protector of her own happiness. Betrayal tore apart Clarissa Hampton's world, but it also revealed the unwavering power she carried within. Stepping beyond hurt and heartbreak, she forged a future on her own terms, fueled by resilience and the unconditional love she held for her child. From the moment she exposed Arthur's affair at the Hampton Holdings Gala, Clarissa chose truth over submission, independence over fear, and healing over bitterness. This story reminds us all that no matter how gilded a life appears, deception can lurk beneath the surface. It is also a testament to the strength it takes to reclaim one's worth in the face of public scandal. If this journey resonated with you, support this channel by hitting the like button, sharing it with friends who love gripping real-life drama, and subscribing for more stories of survival and triumph. Spread the message that even in our darkest moments, we can find the courage to rise.